afternoon, everyone. We are back from recess. And prior to the recess, one of the last couple of questions we asked of the witness was, who prepared your TA for the Guam trip on June 21st, 2018? To which you replied, thank you. To which you replied, the DPS Commissioner Robert Guerrero requested for your trip and was approved by Governor Torres. We will pick up from there. Can we put up the TA? Thank you. And you've already established that there are no typographical errors and that the trip report is accurate prior to the recess, and that there's no missing information as far as you can tell. On your TA, I'd like to direct your attention to section 10. Can we put that up? The purpose of your TA here states that you are to escort CNMI Governor and First Lady to Guam and to bring the DPS boating safety 39 feet 7-inch vessel for repairs on June 21st to the 24th of 2018. Travel will be by boat. Officers will depart Saipan at 6 a.m. on June 21, 2018, and return on June 24, 2018 at 3 p.m. Did you, Officer Galasho, travel, escort, or provide security services to Guam for Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Tudela Torres on June 21st, as is stated on your TA?
I don't recall the date when we did leave, but according to this, it did state on the 21st of June. I did not follow First Lady going there, but to my understanding was we're supposed to meet there and meet up with the First Lady when she arrives, and for me to escort her. And no, I didn't escort her at that weekend or that time we were there.
So at any time, you just said you didn't escort her. So at any time during this trip, you did not escort Mrs. Torres.
To my understanding, when we got there, she was supposed to come in a later date, and I was just there to be on standby for the First Lady. But we departed on the 23rd, and that's when she arrived, and she needed the escort for that day. But we had to leave by boat on that morning, so I couldn't escort the First Lady down there in Guam.
So you did not provide security detail for Mrs. Torres on these travel dates.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. It also states on your TA that you are to bring the DPS boating safety boat for repairs. Is that a factual statement?
Sorry, ma'am, I have no knowledge about the DPS boat.
So there was no boat that was escorted down to Guam for repairs. Is that your statement now?
If that's the boat we rode in, then I believe that maybe that's the boat. But in regards to any boating safety boat, I have no knowledge of the repairs, ma'am.
Was the boat you rode in going down to Guam repaired in Guam?
No knowledge, ma'am.
Do you know the company that repaired the boat?
No knowledge, ma'am.
Do you know the mechanic's name who made repairs on the boat?
I have no knowledge, ma'am, with the repairs.
To your knowledge, was there any boat repaired as is stated on your TA?
I have no knowledge, ma'am, to any boats being repaired.
So this TA Was it prepared with fraudulent pretenses of a boat being repaired, a DPS boat being repaired in Guam that you were a passenger on?
Um,
I have to object to that question.
Duly noted. The witness may answer.
ma'am, I have no knowledge with the DPS boat being repaired, ma'am.
Thank you. That was not the question. To your knowledge, was this TA prepared under false pretenses to repair a DPS boat in Guam?
I don't know, ma'am.
Okay, moving along. Did you pick up the governor? It says there to escort Sina, my governor, and first lady. Did you pick up the governor at his house on your way down to the marina?
Ma'am, for this, I was on standby when they informed me that we're gonna be going to Guam, and we left here on the 21st, and for us to wait for the gov and the first lady, but to my knowledge, she came before we were about to leave, so I wasn't able to escort her.
Can you provide the other names of passengers who were on the boat?
I don't recall who was on the boat with me, ma'am.
Do you recall who the captain was?
No, ma'am.
Were there any civilians on the boat that traveled down to Guam with you?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Did you transport any cargo to Guam on this boat trip?
Not to my knowledge, ma'am.
Did you stop by in Rhoda to fuel up before going to Guam?
Yes, we stopped by Rhoda, but other than fueling or whatsoever, ma'am, I have no knowledge with that.
I'm sorry, come again? I didn't hear you.
Yes, we did stop by Rhoda, but no knowledge why we were there.
The boat was not fueled up.
I'm not so sure, ma'am. I wasn't paying attention the to what's happening when we arrived there.
Were you still on the boat when you guys were in Rhoda? Was the boat, you know, hauled by trailer to get fuel? What was the reason for the stop in Rhoda?
We just arrived at Rhoda by the harbor and waited for like I think maybe give and take 15-30 minutes. Then that's when we left Rhoda, ma'am, to Guam.
Did you pick up any passengers in Rhoda?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
Did you pick up any cargo in
Not that I
Rhoda?
can recall, ma'am.
Okay. After arriving Guam, did you guys have to clear any customs, immigration? Did you guys have port clearance from Guam?
Ma'am, I'm so not sure.
So you don't know who the captain of the boat is, you don't know who the passengers are, or whether there were any civilians. Is that correct?
I don't recall who were in the boat with me, ma'am, but for sure there was a captain.
You don't recall one passenger at all.
Mm, no, ma'am.
Was Governor Torres on the boat?
Not that I can recall.
Was Mrs. Torres on the boat?
No, ma'am.
The part of the TA says the boat was taken down for repairs. Have you ever seen any receipts that the boat was repaired?
No, ma'am.
Do you have any receipts in your possession?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'd like to put up a boarding pass on the Elma at this time. It's dated June 21st, 2018. Officer Galasho, your TA states you are going to escort. Your TA says that you are going to escort Governor, my Governor, and First Lady to Guam on June 21st, 2018. Can you please read the date to me of that boarding pass? It's highlighted.
Sorry, June 21st, 2018, ma'am.
So you could not have been escorting the governor, as your TA states. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Can you please clarify? On June 21st, let me ask it. On June 21st, you could not have possibly been escorting Governor Torres or Mrs. Torres to Guam on a boat based on that boarding pass from Governor Torres's travel documents. Is that correct?
Ma'am, can you kindly repeat your question, ma'am?
On your TA, it states that you are escorting Governor Torres on June 21st, 2018. Based on that boarding pass from Governor Torres's travel documents, is it correct to say that you were not escorting him or First Lady Diane Torres to Guam on a boat?
Ma'am, I rode boat to Guam. We left here by June 21st, and to my knowledge, I know I wasn't with the First Lady escorting her down to Guam.
Or Governor Torres, as your TA states?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Based on a boarding pass, where could Governor Torres possibly physically be when you were supposedly escorting him on a boat to Guam?
I'm going to have to object to this line of questioning, Chair. How is she to contemplate where the governor is based on a boarding pass? How do you expect her to have this knowledge?
Duly noted, she can read it from the boarding pass. Witness, you may answer.
What?
Where is the Governor Torres on June 21st, based on that boarding pass?
Ma'am, I have no knowledge.
Can you read above the date? Can you read the initials, what you can read? It's the airport code. When you are boarding an airplane, you are issued a boarding pass and it has the airport code, airport code of where you are traveling from and to.
Chair, I have to object again. Your question is insinuating that a boarding pass means that someone's on a plane. And also, you're asking my client to extrapolate this, where the governor is, based on information she has no knowledge of.
Thank you, counsel. She can read the boarding pass.
but you're asking her to make a conclusion.
Objection,
That's
Madam
different
Chair.
from
Point
that's
of order.
different from asking her.
Representative Tina Sablon.
Thank you. During the break, if we could remind council that prior to our recess, he had asked if he could register a standing objection, and you graciously acknowledged that he could. And my understanding was that that would mean that he would not continually interrupt this proceeding with objections. So if he wants to raise that standing objection, he may do so, and we can continue.
Chair, if I may. That is exactly what I am doing, and I am not interrupting or disrupting this in any way. Instead, I'm preserving my client's rights, her constitutional rights to have an attorney with her.
Thank you, counsel, duly noted. However, you can advise your client, but you cannot speak for her when we ask questions. The questions are directed to her for her to answer. Thank you. Can you read what that boarding pass says? Where is the governor traveling from and to on June 21st, 2018?
Um, so what I can see, ma'am, it's OI, Oscar uniform, going to Sierra Foxtrot Oscar, SFO.
Thank you. The airport code, the B is not clearly written there, but it is Boise. He's traveling from Boise to San Francisco, so you could not have possibly been escorting the governor, as you have stated earlier, that you were not escorting the governor or the first lady, even though your TA states that you are to escort CNMI governor and first lady to Guam. In January of this year, the mayor of Rhoda settled his case against him in the Superior Court through a plea deal. Previously, the mayor of Rhoda and 7 of his current and former resident department heads were charged by the Attorney General's office. And the dates of the mayor's travel that he was charged with are exactly the same as yours.
Chairwoman, I have to object to this line of questioning once again. You keep asking my client about stuff she has no personal knowledge of. She stated already that she has no personal knowledge.
Duly noted. Do you know if this was a personal trip for the governor to Guam?
No knowledge, ma'am.
Do you know if there was a political gathering on Guam on June 23rd, 2018?
Ma'am, I have no personal knowledge.
Okay, on your trip report, it says you departed Guam on June 23rd, 2018. Again, I want to remind you, your TA states you were escorting CNMI Governor and First Lady Diane Torres. You departed Guam. You've already said that the trip report is accurate.
Objection. Once again, Chair, you're, it doesn't exactly state that she escorted. It says to provide protective service detail to First Lady Diane
Thank
Torres.
you.
So I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to make sure that the record is clear and that we have accurate information at this hearing.
The TA is also clear that it says to escort CNMI Governor and First Lady.
Yes, Chair, but you're referring to this document right here, which doesn't say that.
But all these exhibits are part of this. We will proceed. On your trip report, it says you departed Guam on June 23rd, 2018. Did you escort Governor Torres or First Lady Diane Torres back to Saipan on the boat?
No, ma'am.
Was Governor Torres on the boat?
I can't recall that, ma'am.
Was First Lady Diane Torres on the boat?
No, ma'am.
Who were the passengers on the boat back to Saipan?
I don't recall.
Were there any civilians?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Did you transport any cargo from Guam?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
When you arrived to Saipan, did you clear CNMI Customs, Immigration, or Fish and Wildlife?
I can't recall, ma'am.
Does boating safety have to clear these agencies when they come back from going on a boat trip?
No knowledge, ma'am.
Can we put up the other boarding pass, please, dated June 24th? And this would be exhibit number 6. Your TA states that you escorted CNMI Governor and First Lady Diane Torres to Guam on a boat and return. However, the governor did not depart Guam until June 24th. You departed Guam on June 23rd. Is it correct then to say that you were not escorting the governor when you left Guam on June 23rd?
Chair, she already responded multiple times that the governor was
This is
not
the
with her
return,
on the boat.
council. We were talking about the trip going over to Guam. This is the return trip. Thank you.
And then further, Chair, just to be clear, the purpose and remarks of the TA is to escort, which is different from her trip report. So I just asked that the chairwoman be clear in the question she's asking and when referring to the documents.
This is on the return trip. It states on her TA. Your objection is duly noted, counsel. Witness may answer. Is it correct then to say that you did not escort Governor Torres or First Lady Diane Torres on the return trip from Guam?
No, ma'am.
Did you escort on June 23rd, 2018? Did you or the boat you were traveling in on your return to Guam, did you escort a white Boston whaler boat from Guam to Saipan?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
Did you escort the boat of Vincent Torres from Guam to Saipan on June 23rd, 2018?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
How many boats were used on the return coming back to Saipan that you know of?
One, ma'am. Just one boat.
So there was no convoy of boats, or at least 2 boats.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. At this time, I will yield to other members who may have follow-up questions of you. Recognize Representative Tina Sablon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome back, Officer Galasho. So could you just help us understand then what was the purpose of your trip to Guam?
To my knowledge, ma'am, my purpose was to go down and escort First Lady. And that's pretty much it, ma'am.
Okay. And at the time of this Guam trip, was your primary duty to serve as the personal security officer for the First Lady?
Yes, ma'am.
So who informed you that you were going to be going to Guam to meet her?
One of my bosses, but I don't recall who.
One of your bosses.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't your boss Mrs. Torres at this time?
No, ma'am.
Who was your boss?
If I'm not mistaken, ma'am, was Arnold Semen.
Arnold Semen. And what is his position at DPS?
He's a captain.
Okay, so you answer to him directly
When
at
at
the
that time,
Okay, and you said you had other bosses. Who else was there?
I'm not so sure, ma'am.
Okay, but you had more than one boss at DPS.
Yes.
Okay, so Arnold Semen, but you don't know who the other bosses were?
If I'm not mistaken, ma'am, it was even the commissioner. But during this time, ma'am, I was closely in contact with Arnold Semen.
Okay, and what does it mean? What did you mean when you said that you were told that you were going to be on standby?
I'll be standby, meaning like I'll wait for her call or wait until she needs me and everything, and that's when they will activate me, like for me to actually escort her around.
I see. So if you were not with her and your primary duty at the time was to be her personal security officer, correct?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
If you were not with her and you said that your primary duty was to be her personal security officer at the time, right? Then who was with her?
No knowledge, ma'am. At that time, I was still on standby. I haven't officially became her PSD. I wasn't officially her PSD at the time, and I was just running on a standby schedule.
Oh, so prior to becoming her official PSD, you sometimes also occasionally served as
Yes, ma'am.
her PSD.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it wasn't your primary duty.
No, at that time, no, ma'am.
Okay, so I guess that's clear. And where did the First Lady come from if she wasn't on Guam when you arrived?
I have no knowledge, ma'am.
Okay. And did you ever meet with the First Lady at any time during this trip? Did you see her at all?
Not that I can recall.
You can't recall seeing her. Do you recall seeing the governor at this time?
I can't recall that, ma'am, too.
Okay. And may I ask then, why did you return to Saipan without the First Lady?
Well, I was told that we're gonna go there and stand by for the first lady until she arrives,
Mm-hmm.
and then I believe to escort her to some functions.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, ma'am, I don't know.
You were told that you were to escort her to some functions on Guam?
Yes, or follow her around.
Okay. Do you know what those functions were?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
Do you know where these functions were?
No, ma'am.
And you mentioned in your trip report, the trip report that you signed, mentions that you traveled with other DPS personnel. Who else was on this boat that was DPS personnel?
I don't recall, ma'am.
And was the same boat that you traveled to Guam on? Was the boat that you traveled to Guam on the same boat that you took to return to
Yes, ma'am.
Saipan? Okay, so it was the DPS impact boat. That part is correct.
Yes, ma'am.
It was definitely a DPS boat.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the rest of this trip report, you says that you left the Guam Marina, you ate at King's Restaurant, you went to Pela Supermarket, and then stayed at the Guam Airport Hotel. Does any of this ring a bell? Do you recall doing this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you don't remember who was there with you?
No, ma'am.
Not even one person.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall doing anything that was official business on this trip?
I don't recall, ma'am.
And so is it fair to say then that there may not have been any official business conducted on this trip,
I'm not so sure, ma'am.
but you were not involved in any official business other than to be on standby.
For First Lady, yes.
Okay. And one thing I wanted to understand better is just procedurally, is it typical for somebody else in your department to prepare the trip reports when they themselves were not the person who went on the trip? Is there somebody in your department that drafts the trip reports for everybody that goes on trips?
I have no knowledge that my mom's my first trip going off island, so
That was your first trip?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you don't know who prepared it for you?
no.
Who asked you to sign it?
If I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. But the details of that trip, I mean, somebody must have called you to say, right?
If not, it might be one of the personnels that we went with.
Mhm.
Had a similar, because I know it was a group, but I don't really recall who
Mhm.
was there with me.
Yeah.
So yes.
Okay. And while you were in Guam, you didn't hear anything about any political campaign event that was happening on Guam during the time that, or on or about the same time that you and your colleagues and some other government officials were there? You didn't hear anything about a political campaign event?
Sorry, ma'am, I can't recall.
Okay. I yield, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. Are there any other members who have follow-up questions? Recognize Representative Richard Lazama.
Thank you, Madam Chair. State your name again, ma'am.
My name is Jomelin Galasho.
Officer
Yes,
Delasso.
yes, sir.
Were you fully aware of the trip that you make to Guam was for an escort?
To my knowledge, yes.
You can remember that.
Yes.
Did you ever ask the group that you're with, oh, I'm here for this purpose, what's going on? To find out for yourself, are you for sure that you went to Guam for the purpose of escorting the governor or lieutenant governor once they arrive?
So to my knowledge, sir, before we even left, they informed me that I will be going on a trip to Guam to escort the First Lady and just stand by for when we arrive at Guam.
Did you ever ask what time is the governor, lieutenant governor, the governor or the first lady will be arriving
No,
to,
ma'am. Oh, no, sir.
to
Sorry.
fulfill your obligation that you went there for an escort purposes?
I'm sorry.
Did you ever ask anyone what time is the governor or the first lady to be arrived in Guam to fulfill your purpose of that trip?
I have no knowledge. I can't recall that, sir.
Thank you. I hear that, man.
Thank you, Representative Lazama. I recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Hi there again, officer. Just got a couple questions here. Were you provided an official trip itinerary for the governor or the first lady on that trip?
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat your question?
Were you provided an official trip itinerary? What that is a list of everything they're doing, time, place, everything. It shows everything that they're going to do there on an official capacity. Were you ever provided that?
No, sir.
So if you were standby, who escorted the governor and the first lady on that trip?
I have no knowledge, sir.
Thank you. I yield.
Recognize Representative Donald Manglonia.
Thank you, Chair. Hello again, Officer Galasio. Just few clarifying questions. When did you officially take the role as Mrs. Torres's PSD?
Um, January, if I'm not mistaken, 2019
To when?
to January or February 2020.
And who came before you? Before your time?
Official PSD, sir? Is
Who
that
did
what
you
you're
replace? Yes. If you replaced someone prior
um
to you coming on board.
no knowledge. When I came on board, my colleague was a standby as well. So she was asking if she First Lady Jan Torres, to my knowledge, didn't have an official PSD at the time. She was just running on standby officers.
And you mentioned that Lady Diane arrived on Guam the day you departed Guam. Is that correct?
Um, to my knowledge, yes.
Do you know where she came from?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, Chair. How you?
Thank you, Representative Magnolia. Are there any other questions from the members? Follow-up questions? Recognize Representative Camacho.
I just want to clarify something here. Um, I believe you just stated that you were assigned um, to be the escort for Diana in January 2018. Is that what you said? Just a minute ago? 2019. Okay, I thought I was hearing something different, but I thought I heard that. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Rep- Recognize Representative Acto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Officer Glacio, Council, welcome to the House Chamber. Just a few questions. I know that there's multiple similar questions that the members had asked, and your trip report had mentioned that you had gone to King's Restaurant. Do you remember what you ordered that morning?
No, sir.
No? Okay. Do you remember what you bought at Payless Supermarket?
No, sir. Not that I can recall.
Those are questions to ask because you obviously don't remember who was on board on the boat with you. Who was the OIC during this trip?
I have no knowledge, sir.
Okay. I yield for now, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have some questions. From what we can gather, you do not know if the boat was repaired, although your travel authorization says it. Did they not tell you? Didn't anybody at DPS tell you that the boat was going to be repaired in Guam?
I don't remember, ma'am.
And who asked you to go on this trip? I'm sorry, I may have missed it.
If I'm not mistaken, Arnold Seman informed me that I'll be going on a trip to Guam.
Do you recall what he told you after, he said you're going to go on a trip to Guam? Do you recall anything else from that conversation?
If I'm not mistaken, to escort First Lady Torres.
Did the governor's office prepare your TA?
I have no knowledge with that, ma'am.
Okay, normally, when you go on a travel, when Mr. Semen informed you that you were going to escort the governor and the first lady to Guam on a boat. Normally, a per diem check is cut. Do you recall receiving per diem for this trip?
Yes, ma'am.
When were you informed? How far out before the trip were you informed that you were going on a trip to Guam?
If I'm not mistaken, like a few days.
And you received your per diem check before you left.
If I can recall, yes, ma'am.
So let me get this straight. Mr. Semen informed you were going on a boat trip to escort the governor and Mrs. Torres to Guam. You received your per diem check and you didn't ask what the itinerary was, the detailed itinerary of the governor's activities or Mrs. Torres's activities. Normally, PSD would require that.
No, ma'am. We usually just somewhat wing it, or I just follow what First Lady's agenda for that time or was. So I usually just go along with the First Lady's schedule.
Did you receive overtime as a result of going to Guam on this trip?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
Do you receive, or once you were assigned as a PSD, did your NOPA change to reflect any additional entitlement as a PSD?
Oh, sorry, ma'am. Can you kindly repeat your question?
Oh, when you were assigned as a PSD, you said there was an application you filled out with details of what your duties are supposed to be. Did you receive any additional entitlement aside from your salary? Any entitlement as a PSD? Monetary entitlement.
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
So you don't get any extra pay for being a PSD?
Besides the 30 per annum from switching from PO1 to PSD, that's pretty much it, ma'am.
Did you get a salary increase when they assigned you as a PSD?
When I officially signed my documents,
Yes.
yes, my salary changed.
How much of a change was it from PO1 to a PSD?
If I'm not mistaken, as a PO1, I make maybe 21 to 23 maybe, and then from um signing the document for a PSD is like 30.
30 meaning 30,000
Yes, ma'am.
per annum.
Yes, ma'am.
Who signs your timesheet? When you were assigned as a PSD, who was signing off on your timesheet on the hours you have worked?
If I'm not mistaken, ma'am, it's Joey Cruz
Is he your supervisor?
for PSD. Yes.
How many supervisors did you have as a PSD?
Just Joey one.
So Arnold Semen was not your supervisor at the time you were assigned?
So when I was under Arnold Seman, I was still under patrol, and that's when I wasn't under PSD yet until I signed my contract on, if I'm not mistaken, January 2019.
Pertaining to this trip, I think I have just one more question. You earlier stated that you were not officially a PSD until 2019.
Yes, ma'am.
However, this TA is in 2018. And it states on your TA, or on your trip report, I'm sorry. My purpose at Guam is to provide protective service detail to First Lady Diane Torres. You are not officially a PSD at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But you were providing protective service detail.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions from the members before I move on? Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm still trying to understand, Officer Gilasho, like what did you do for 3 days on Guam then? Like besides, I mean, okay, we see that you had lunch at King's with your fellow officers, and then there was a run to Payless to buy some supplies, but then you're there from June 21st, June 22nd, June 23rd, and then you headed back, right? So what else happened during that time?
I just waited for First Lady to come, and when she arrives, I would just.
Okay, but she never actually came
Yes, ma'am.
while you were there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you in communication with the governor or the first lady at all?
That one, ma'am, I'm sorry, I can't recall.
Okay. And then would you help us also understand if your primary responsibility in going on this trip was to provide protective service detail to the first lady, why did you come back without her?
Because I was coming back by boat, and to my knowledge, that's how we got there. We should have left the same way, I believe. I mean, we don't have the um yes, money to fly me back by plane.
I see. But was the plan, as you understood it, for the first lady to come back on the boat?
I'm not so sure, ma'am. My
Okay.
The info that I got is for me to go there and escort the first lady at Guam, but
Mhm.
no knowledge about coming back or.
I see. Okay. And then I guess my final question for you, just more generally, what would you say are the differences, like just in the day-to-day duties of being a protective service officer versus being a police officer?
What's the difference?
Could you just describe for us, like just your day-to-day activities? What was that like?
For being PSD for first lady?
Mm-hmm.
So I usually just follow an escort, and the first lady with her agendas for that day. Um, make sure she's okay, safe. Her surroundings is safe as well.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, yes, follow her around.
Follow her around. Driving. You were mostly the driver, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what about like cooking,
No,
cleaning?
no, ma'am.
Did you do anything around the house?
Not really, ma'am. No.
Okay. So mostly just following her, driving, sometimes picking up her kids. Okay. You answered that part. But yeah, I'm still a little bit puzzled about this trip, and I know that the chair has other questions about other trips, so I will yield for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. Two more, sorry. Did anyone tell you to reply that you do not recall who you ate with, what you ate at King's, what you bought at Payless, who the passengers were? Did anybody tell you?
No, ma'am.
Because it's very surprising that you don't remember anybody
Sorry, ma'am.
you rode with.
Sorry, that's like 2 years ago.
Are you withholding any information at this time? I want to remind you, you are under oath.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll move to the next TA, exhibit number 2. Thank you. Can we go down to the signature page part? Sorry. Officer Galasha, is that your signature on the travel voucher?
Yes, ma'am.
And who is the person's signature that appears, or whose name is typed as approving as being the department, agency, or head to approve your travel?
Gulf Tours.
Thank you. On your TA, it states you traveled beginning on or about February 12th, 2019, ending on or about February 17th, 2019. You traveled to the Philippines and returned. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you read the purpose and remarks, item 10 on that TA?
Ma'am, do you want to read it out loud or?
Yes, please.
To provide a protective service for First Lady Diane T. Torres.
Thank you. Do you recall what the purpose of the First Lady's trip is to the Philippines?
No, ma'am.
Did you travel on the same flight as Mrs. Torres?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever driven in the Philippines?
No, ma'am.
On your TA, you were authorized car rental. Did you rent a car?
No, ma'am.
What was your what was the purpose of you having to provide security services for Mrs. Torres?
Sorry, ma'am. Can you repeat that question?
What was the purpose of you having to provide protective services for Mrs. Torres to the Philippines?
Um, to protect First Lady, ma'am.
Was she in the Philippines on any official capacity?
Not to my knowledge.
So basically, you're just you provide security services, whether it's official duties or unofficial. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes, ma'am.
Do you know if this was a personal trip for Mrs. Torres?
I'm not so sure, ma'am.
Did Mrs. Torres meet with any government agency from the Philippines during this trip?
No, ma'am.
Do you recall who else was in the Philippines during this time?
Can you kindly elaborate, ma'am?
Sure. Do you recall any other persons while you were in the Philippines? Do you recall seeing any other persons with Mrs. Torres in the Philippines from Saipan?
Ma'am, I can recall her sisters.
Wasn't it in fact a personal trip for Mrs. Torres? This was the dates that her mother was medically referred and her sisters did go to the Philippines.
That I'm not so sure, ma'am.
You don't know if her mother was there present in the Philippines?
Her mother was there, yes.
Was she on medical referral?
That one I don't know.
I will yield my time right now for other members who may have follow-up questions. Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on this trip to the Philippines, you do recall the First Lady's sisters already being there, or did they travel with you?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Okay, but you remember them being there
Yes, ma'am.
along with their mother.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said as far as you can recall, there was no official government business being conducted on this trip.
Not that I know, ma'am.
Do you recall, or can you tell the committee where you went during these, was it 4 days in the Philippines? From the 12th to, to the 17th?
To what I can recall, ma'am, we went to when we arrived there. We settled in the hotel, and then the next few days we were just going around looking for some stuff for First Lady's Foundation, and yes,
You were looking for some stuff for the First Lady's Foundation. How were you getting around?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
How were you getting around?
A driver?
Okay. Was this driver a CNMI government employee?
Not that I know of.
So somebody who was hired there.
I believe so, ma'am.
And what stuff for the First Lady's Foundation were you all looking for?
We're going around looking for like pins, stickers, things like that.
Okay. So it was like a shopping trip for the First Lady?
I don't know, ma'am.
Was there any other CNMI government employee on this trip with you?
I don't believe so, ma'am.
Okay. Did you make any trips to the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what else do you remember?
Not much. Just looking for pins, stickers, stuff for her office or foundation, and trips to the hospital,
Mhm.
and maybe lunch, dinner.
Okay. Okay, and then when you returned with the First Lady.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And just to clarify, you were the only PSD on this trip.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you were working around the clock then.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. I yield my questions for now.
I recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you. Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Officer Galixio. I I'm just curious for this trip to the Philippines as her security detail, personal security detail. Um, do you know if was there anything done before the trip that you know of for her security, her personal security heading to Manila? Did do you know if the Philippine government were contacted to provide additional security or or anything to that nature?
No knowledge, sir.
Okay, so it was clearly just you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did when you went to the Philippines, went through did anyone in the Philippines recognize who the First Lady was? Did anybody come up to you and say hello, First Lady, like anybody in the Philippines?
I'm not so sure, ma'am. Sir. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. At any point going to Manila during your providing the security detail to in the Philippines, was her life in any imminent danger? Was there any danger to her or anything on this trip? Was her life in jeopardy or in danger at any time? Was she ever threatened or anything?
Not that I can recall, sir.
Okay. Um, were you armed during this trip? Did you carry a weapon or a gun or anything?
I don't recall, sir.
Okay. Well, I think you could be able to recall. Like when you left Saipan and went to Manila, did you bring a gun with you?
I'm not so sure.
Well, you would have to you'd have to prepare for something like that, correct? So likely you did not. I mean, you would remember if you were carrying your sidearm, right, on a trip.
I'm so sorry. I really don't recall if
You
I
don't you
did.
don't recall. Okay. Um, so you were providing security for the first lady and her family, or is it just specifically for the first lady?
Just for the first lady.
Just for the first lady. Okay. But from your recollection, there was no perceived threats or anything when you on this trip. Is that correct?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. This is the only trip that you went with her outside of the Commonwealth? Or,
No, sir.
okay. So you've been on other trips with her?
Yes.
Okay. To the States, right? To the mainland?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, when you travel to the United States, do you carry a sidearm? Do you carry a weapon with you for security
Yes.
detail?
Yes, sir.
You do. Okay.
Yes.
But you don't recall if you did in the Philippines?
I don't recall the one going to Philippines, but I do recall the one going to the States, sir.
Okay. Okay. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. Officer Galasho, how many times have you traveled with the First Lady to the Philippines?
Just once.
Just this trip.
Yes, ma'am.
How many times have you traveled by boat with the First Lady?
With the first lady, maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe.
On a boat.
Yes.
Do you recall where you guys went when you were on a boat?
To Tinian,
All of them to Tinian.
and maybe Managawa, if that counts.
I'm sorry?
Managawa, if that counts.
To Maniagaha. Was the trip to Maniagaha official, on official business? Was she conducting any businesses there? Was she conducting any meetings with any government agencies on Maniagaha? What was the
Um,
purpose of the trip to Maniagaha?
Maybe personal.
Personal, was it on a DPS boat?
Yes.
To your knowledge, this trip to the Philippines, was it a personal trip for the First Lady?
No knowledge, ma'am.
Was she conducting any meetings with any government agencies in the Philippines?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
To your knowledge, during the trip to the Philippines, the whole entire 4 or 5 days, Mrs. Torres did not meet with any government agencies from the Philippines.
I don't think so, ma'am.
And she, or both of you, went around shopping for the foundation, Lady Diane Foundation. Is that correct?
We were looking for um, places to order pins and stickers and things like that.
In your opinion, is that official business, official government business?
I'm not so sure. I don't know.
She wasn't conducting any meetings or with any government agencies. She was shopping. Is that personal or government business?
For the foundation, ma'am, that's what you're asking?
Yes.
I'm sorry, we don't know.
Thank you. Are there any other follow-up questions? I will recognize Representative Richard Lazama.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Officer Solana?
Galasho.
Slush, I'm sorry. So I'm having a problem pronouncing your name. While you were in the Philippines, Manila, were you ever separated especially in a hotel, how many rooms down from this lady that she was staying in to the room that you were staying in? How far? How are you just next door as a protective service? How far are you down or away from the first lady?
If I'm not mistaken, maybe like few rooms down.
Two, three, four.
I don't recall how many rooms.
Okay. Did you ever separate besides the hotel when you go on shopping? Separate away from, and that is a purpose for you to be protecting the first lady. Will you ever separate with the first lady?
No.
You stay with her at all times.
Yes.
Did you ever have to say, can I look at some areas over there to see if I can find my own shopping spree? Did you
Not that
ever?
I can recall.
Okay. About upon arrival, were you both clearing the port of entry?
To what I can recall, yes, we were together.
You would, and then the same thing happens on your return. Is that correct? I mean, is that also the case that you stay with her when you're returning back?
Yes, that to what I can recall, yes.
Never separated.
Not that I know of.
Thank you. I hear back.
Thank you. Anybody else? Recognize Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you. And Officer Galatian, just because, and I thank you for mentioning it's about these pins that you were in search of. Just out of curiosity, did you guys end up finding the pins at one of the stores that you went to? Did you ever find the pins that you were looking for?
I believe so.
Okay, so they were found. That's good to know. Okay. Um, one moment. When so as a security detail, there are times when you are separated from the first lady. Does that happen in your normal daily routine?
Um, we're usually with her unless we need to maybe use the restroom or.
Okay, that's of course that's understandable. Certainly, you would want that space. The so like for example, if you were to go and pick up the kids, pick up her kids. Um, is she always with you on those trips when you go to pick up the kids?
Not always.
Okay, great. So at the time when you're picking up the kids and obviously you're not providing the security detail, is it protocol to call for another backup to guard the first lady? Is that how it's conducted? I'm just trying to get a better understanding for is that
Um, Usually we wait for our incoming. So either Officer Atlee was with First Lady already, and I did either pick up the kids. So I know someone's with the First Lady.
okay. I I am curious because just so we can put things into context, uh, and this is something that I know you may not have the answers, but I like to put it out out into the universe so that we can get a better understanding and a feel for those for our colleagues, for others. Is it we hear about all the security detail, obviously even going to the Philippines, where the first lady is probably not really known in the Philippines. Again, you mentioned earlier that not really anybody came up. There was nothing to your recollection of people identifying her. Um, so to put things into context, I don't think anybody in the Senate or the House, at least that I know of, has security detail. Certainly none of our spouses. Um, and we are under a lot of criticism, a lot of at times, and especially for controversial um, committee hearings, perhaps something like this that could anger some people. We still don't have security detail. Um, on a, I'm sorry. When did you start as a security detail? Uh,
Is that officially, sir? Or
yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, officially as a security.
if I'm not mistaken, January 2019?
Okay, 2019. Okay, just from my conversations with former governors or their spouses, it is not common. It is very actually unheard of for the first lady to have full-time security detail. I'm just curious for this. Is it because are there on your normal day-to-day routine? Do you see a lot of perceived threats? Are there a lot of threats to the first lady to justify this security detail?
To my opinion, not all the time, sir.
Okay, but we live in a relatively peaceful community. Um, are there people that are threatening to the first lady or for this security detail? I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, sir?
Is have you seen perceived threats uh, toward the first lady to justify this security? So you've been providing the security detail throughout all these trips, through dropping the children and doing all these trips off island and here on Saipan. What I'm asking is for the justification of this. Are there daily threats? Are there perceived threats that are happening every time that you escort or provide this security detail?
Maybe not every day, sir.
But you're saying that there are threats.
There's maybe some threats, sir.
Have you, with those perceived threats, uh, do you have you ever had to uh, do a evacuation or evade and evacuate an emergency or something like that? Have you ever had to pull out your sidearm to protect the first lady?
For me, sir, not yet, sir.
Not yet. So never. It's never happened.
For me, sir, no.
Okay. Okay. By you saying not you, but others, there have been others where they've had to pull out their sidearm or their revolver or whatever.
That one I'm not so sure, sir.
Okay. But from your perspective, you've never had to go into this evasive action or something on an emergency because of a threat, a direct threat. Is that correct?
For me, no, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. Can we go down to the signature page, please? Or the signature area? Officer Galasho. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Galasho. Thank you. The requester of the TA for you to provide security services for First Lady Diane T. Torres. Can you read the name that requested this travel for you?
Um, Governor Torres.
And can you tell me who approved this TA?
Um, Gov Torres.
So Governor Torres approved a travel authorization for you to provide his wife protective services in the Philippines while her mother was on medical referral. And as far as we can tell from your testimony today, went shopping and did not meet with any government agencies of the Philippines. Is that correct? The governor approved this TA for you to travel with his wife?
Um, well, according to the TA, ma'am, yes, Gulf Tours approved it.
Thank you. Um, are you familiar with the law with respect to travel, government travel? Specifically, the Planning and Budgeting Act, 1 CMC 7407. Are you familiar with that?
No, ma'am.
Short recess. I just have one thing. Within 15 days after completion of a government travel, the traveler shall submit a detailed trip report. Do you have any trip reports for this travel?
No, ma'am.
Do you know why you didn't submit a travel trip report?
I'm not so sure, ma'am.
Okay, on your TA, box number 10, purpose and remarks, it says travel to be performed in the best interest of the seat of my government. Do you feel that this trip was performed in the best interest of the seat of my government?
Ma'am, my job was just to my purpose going there was just to protect the first lady. So I believe I did do that part.
You completed your duty. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. One other thing, you said you visited hospitals while you were in the Philippines with Mrs. Torres. Which hospitals did you visit?
I don't recall the name.
St. Luke's Hospital,
I'm not so sure.
Asia?
I'm not so sure.
Okay, fair enough. Was Mrs. Torres's mom admitted to any of the hospitals that you were visiting?
I'm not so sure, ma'am.
So what was your purpose to visit a hospital? Yes, please.
Sorry, ma'am. Can you repeat your question?
Okay, you earlier testified that you visited hospitals and you don't recall which one. I asked you if Mrs. Torres's mom was admitted to any hospital. And then the last question posed to you was, do you recall what was the purpose of Mrs. Torres visiting any hospital in the Philippines? that would
Um,
require your protective services?
I don't know, ma'am. I was just there just to follow on First Lady.
So, I find that a bit troubling as a protective service personnel that you do not know the First Lady's, your principals rather, your principal's detailed itinerary, that you do not recall who, any other security details that were around. It's very troubling
Sorry.
to hear that from a security detail who is supposed to be providing security. I mean, how can you provide security if you don't know what the threats are or any other persons that may be around? One last question. You are now police officer one.
Yes, ma'am.
So you were police officer one, then you were assigned as a PSD. They had a change in your personnel records. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you transitioned from a personal security detail back to a PO1, is that correct?
Yes.
Did your salary adjust as well?
Yes. I went back to about maybe 21 to 23.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would like to take a short recess, please. One moment. One moment. Short recess.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. I know we all need a recess right now, but Ms. Galasio, do you have, or Galasio, do you have any trip report for this travel that was taken to the Philippines?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
I just, I'm asking this, and I'm sure that the members are concerned about this because we don't want the Department of Finance garnishing your paychecks here on forward, knowing the fact that you have not provided a trip report. And this is going to cost you $868.80 in addition to $62.80. We don't want that for you. So if you do have a trip report, I would highly encourage that you turn in a trip report for this specific travel. And if you can provide the members of this committee this trip report. I really don't want you to have to go through this. There's many other government employees that had their paychecks garnished for not turning in trip reports. You're not going to be the first one. I'm sure you're not, we won't be the last ones, but just from our end, we've gone through that and we don't want you to go through this. So if you do have a trip report or furnish a trip report to the Department of Finance and this committee, if you can do that for us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I'm sorry, one last question from Representative Richard Lazama before we actually do take a break.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As an officer, ma'am, do you keep a record of your daily activities? Even like right now, if you are on the road, do you note things down? What do you see bad? What do you see good? Do you have that procedure?
With my job now, sir.
Yes.
Right now I'm not under patrol. I'm under CID, and I'm a crime scene tech right now for CID. And what I usually do is evidence wise, so I don't really go out and take notes and what. But
So by being a CID officer, Criminal Investigation Bureau, the place you work, you do write reports, correct?
I do write some stuff, sir. Yes.
On your trip to Manila or even in Guam, do you try to memorize? What do you do so that when your supervisor, your boss, asks you what have you done, you at least have something to show that yes, indeed, you were performing the duty of a protective service detail to the First Lady. Do you ever come to your mind that I must do this as a professional officer?
Sir, when I was with the first lady, I usually had my government phone with me, and I do log down my times in, my times out, and that's what I used to keep track of it. But right now, sir, I don't have my PSD phone, so
And do you also noted all that some of the activities, anything that have happened to the first lady, example, trip herself, time and date? Would you do that?
no, sir. I usually just go straight up to my supervisor and inform him about the incident that happened.
I'm trying to figure out why you couldn't remember any of this question. Thank you, ma'am. I yield back.
Thank you. Short recess, please. Thank you. We are now back from recess. And I want to remind the witness that she's still under oath and that the last question came from Representative Richard Lazama asking or informing the witness about being detailed in your reports and everything. I will now recognize Representative Donald Manglonia.
Thank you, Chair. Hello again, Officer Galasio. Going back to your Philippine trip, is this the only time you've flown the Philippines under or as a PSD for Miss Diane Torres?
Oh, yes, sir.
Have you gone to any other foreign country with Mrs. Diane Torres?
Foreign country, no, sir.
Do you know how many trips you've taken with Mrs. Diane Torres outside the CNMI?
Would that be including Tinian?
Outside the CNMI?
Well, just two.
And where are those locations other than Philippines?
The other one would be Washington.
All right. While you were assigned as a PSD for Mrs. Diane Torres, has your title changed during that 14-month period?
I'm sorry, sir.
Has your title during the 14 months you were assigned to Mrs. Diane Torres, has your title changed from a personal security detail?
Um, I don't think so, sir.
So you never had a title of special agent, as is stated in your TA2 Philippines?
Oh, yes, sir.
What's that?
Oh, yes, sir.
You never changed your title?
Um, to my knowledge, it's supposed to be special agent.
So you said it's supposed to be special agent. What is that? How is that different from your title as a PSD?
Um, for PSD, sir, we're usually supposed to be special agent, sir. If we're under PSD, we're actually titled as a special agent, sir.
So PSD shares the same title as a special agent?
Um, PSD is just I believe job description or just a title, so but the title when we did sign the contracts was it's supposed to be a special agent.
All right. So clarified. And since being a PSD, has your salary reverted back to a PO1?
After PSD, yes, it went back to my P1 salary.
All right. Thank you. Chair, are you?
Thank you, Representative Manglonia. Having an issue with the transition between PO1 to PSD. I'll discuss it in miscellaneous, I guess, with the team about civil service playing a role in that. At this time, I will recognize Representative Ed Probst.
I yield at this point for this. Thank you.
Thank you. I will recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some general questions that I think we can save till after we get through this next TA. And yeah, so I'll yield my time for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. At this time, we will move forward with the next set of documents, Exhibit 3. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we move down to the signature part? Is that your signature, Officer Galasho?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see any typographical errors on your travel documents?
I think, ma'am, it's okay.
Thank you. Looking at these documents, when the governor traveled from Washington, D.C. on February 28, 2019, and landed in Narita on March 1st, 2019, you were already assigned as a personal security detail to Mrs. Torres. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The governor made a 2-day stop in Narita. Did you, I mean, I'm sorry, let me take that back. You made a 2-day stop in Narita. Did the governor and First Lady Diane Torres also make a 2-day stop in Narita, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, ma'am, yes.
Do you know if that was a personal layover?
Ma'am, that would be the layover.
Yes,
Yes.
in Narita. It was a personal layover.
It's a layover. Yes.
Is it a personal layover?
Um, I don't believe so, ma'am.
Did Governor Torres or Mrs. Torres meet with any government officials in Narita?
Not to my knowledge.
Did they conduct any official business while in Narita?
Not to my knowledge, ma'am.
Do you believe it's a personal layover?
Ma'am, that would be a part of our travel.
So as far as you know, you did not witness Mrs. Torres or Governor Torres conduct any official business during their 2-day layover in Narita.
To my knowledge, no, ma'am.
When you travel as a security detail, do you incur overtime?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you on a 24-hour clock at that point?
While we're traveling, yes.
Do you know how many security details traveled with you to provide security services for Governor Torres and Mrs. Torres during this DC trip?
There's a total of 4, including myself.
4, including yourself. Is it 4 for Mrs. Torres?
2 for First Lady and 2 for Gov Tours.
Do you recall who those PSDs are?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us the names?
For First Lady, myself, and Janica Atrig, and for Governor Torres will be Joey Cruz and Jesse Sablon.
Thank you. Did you file any trip reports pertaining to this travel as required by law? Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. The justification. I would draw that question.
Just a point of clarification.
Recognize
Madam Chair.
Representative Salon.
I actually think the question is still worth asking because that's a travel justification having to do with parking fees. It's not the actual trip report. Thank you.
Do you recall what you did during this travel?
Um, we escorted the First Lady and Governor to DC, and we escorted them to events for um,
Do you recall what those events are?
it deals with the governor and the Governors Association or something like that, ma'am.
Have you ever purchased anything with your personal credit card or debit card and given your receipt to the governor to be reimbursed?
While on trip, ma'am.
On any occasion as when you were detailed as a security detail, have you ever received any reimbursements after giving the governor your receipt?
Sorry, ma'am. Can you repeat your question?
Sorry. Have you ever purchased anything with your personal debit or credit card and given your receipt to Governor Torres or Mrs. Torres to be reimbursed later on?
No, ma'am.
I will yield at this time to other members. I recognize Representative Richard Lozama.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, um, Officer Lasha. While you were in DC, do you remember who else was the security protective service for the governor? Do you remember?
For the governor will be Joey Cruz and Jesse Sablon.
Do you have any other female for the first lady? Were you by yourself?
Yes, I was accompanied by Janika Atlip.
Did you, as in Washington D.C., we got a good, famous representative office there. Have you visited that office?
We were
Anyone, the governor, lieutenant, I mean, the first lady, ever thought about, hey, let's go see how's our resident representative doing?
yes, sir.
Did you guys visit it?
Yes, but I'm not so sure if First Lady and Gov made contact, but we were around his office,
We were supposed to be escorting the governor, the
the First
first
Lady.
lady. Did she go into the office and you escort her in, or you stay on the outside? Because your job is to protect her.
Sir, I'm sorry I don't recall that because there's two of us. It's usually one goes in with the First Lady, so maybe at that time it wasn't me.
Okay, just like what you did in the Philippines. Can you recall if you do any shopping?
Shopping for the First Lady.
Remember, she has a what do you call it, a Diane Foundation.
I'm sorry, which one?
Do you remember? You know that she has a First Lady Foundation,
Yes, she does.
and so she didn't go and see what she can buy for a foundation while she was there.
I believe she just we went there. We were looking for some areas to look for some pins, stickers, and etc.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Lozama. Is there any other member? Recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may, sorry. I think she was confused. We're speaking about
No, as an example, when you went to the Philippines, you did some shopping, and while you were in DC, did you happen to do the same thing while you were there? Went out and shopping,
For me myself, sir,
and the first lady.
uh, we we followed her to some um like stores and just to get some stuff.
Okay. And none of, would you remember if you was at the store looking for her foundation, like what she did in the
No,
film?
sorry.
Okay, thank you. I hear back.
You said you went around looking for some stuff. Do you know what kind of stuff?
Like just the basic stuff that we need for the hotel.
Fair enough. Are there any other members? Recognize Rep Ed Probst.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Officer Galacio. I was just curious for this particular trip. We didn't notice the increase in security detail. Normally, it's just you that escorts the First Lady. On this trip, it required two security detail for the First Lady, you and Officer Atelig, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, do you know what the justification was for increasing the security to two for the First Lady for this trip to DC?
No knowledge, sir.
Were you surprised that there was an additional security detail enlisted for this particular trip?
Sorry, sir. Can you repeat your question?
Were you surprised that there, because normally it is just you as one security detail, is that correct?
It's I believe just one.
Yes, but I'm saying on this particular trip there was an additional security detail. It was you and Officer Atelig. Is this unusual to have two security detail for a trip versus just yourself?
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about that, sir.
Okay, have you normally when you travel with the First Lady, is it just your, are you the only security detail for the First Lady?
Um, I'm not the only one, sir, for First Lady Diane Torres.
So on other trips that you've gone on, there are other security detail, including yourself?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay, now I'm confused. Okay, let me try to clarify this even a little bit more clear. I apologize if my questions aren't clear. On this trip to DC, how many security detail were provided for the First Lady?
Two.
Okay, that was yourself and Officer Atelig, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In previous trips that you've taken with the First Lady to the Philippines or inter-island or other places, is there another time where you've had another security detail for the First Lady?
No, sir.
Okay, so that, thank you for clarifying that. And that is why I'm asking, this is unusual. Were you surprised to find out that there was two security detail versus just yourself? Okay, so do you have um, no knowledge of why there was an increase in security detail for this trip to DC? No one explained this to you?
No, sir.
Okay. Um, you did mention that you went shopping in DC, obviously. I mean, that happens. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. Um, when you do go on these shopping expeditions with the First Lady, do both of you escort the First Lady on these excursions for shopping or for anything?
Yes, we're usually accompanied.
So it's the both of you.
Yes.
Okay. At this time on this trip, do you remember if you were carrying sidearms?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you were armed.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were there, again, were there any registered threats on this trip at all?
Not that I can recall, sir.
Okay, so there were no threats. Did you at any time take any side trips? Was it only from when you were in DC for these days? Did you take any side trips out of DC? Did you travel outside of DC with the First Lady at any time?
No, sir.
Okay, so you for the intent for based on your actual itinerary, you were in DC for all of those days. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I wanted to verify that. Um, Thank you, Officer Galacio. I have no questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. A couple of questions. Do you recall on this trip? Do you recall on this trip if you guys made a layover in Micronesia, anywhere in the Micronesian islands?
No, ma'am.
So that itinerary or on the travel voucher is correct to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I would recognize Representative Vicente Camacho.
Thank you, Chair. Uh, Officer Galacio, of the 3 trips that you accompanied the First Lady on, which would you say of the 3 trips was the toughest trip? Washington, D.C., Philippines, or Guam?
For me, maybe Washington.
And why?
It's it's just a long flight, and there's we just had a lot of events while we're at DC.
Okay, but you do know that Washington, D.C. is a U.S. state.
Yes.
Next question. Which of these 3 trips do you think require more attention to detail where the principal may be at risk?
Sir, for that, my opinion would be or for me, it would be Washington.
And why?
We're just um we're just going to different events, um, trying to meet the time, trying to reach the location, and yeah.
So you don't think the Philippines is a risk to take our diplomats to without paying attention to detail? And why?
Sorry, sir, one more time.
So you don't think that the Philippines, a foreign country, would be more at risk to take our diplomats to without and not pay attention to details?
For my opinion, I mean, every trip is, we have to try to pay attention to details possible. Every time we're there with our principal, it's our job, and to secure them and make sure that they're okay, or my part, that she's okay, she's safe, and everything.
You escort her by yourself on these Philippine trips, right?
Yes, I escorted her by myself.
By yourself. How many details did you guys have in Washington, D.C.?
For the first lady,
Yeah.
we had two.
But for the Philippines, one where it's more high risk. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 12 years. I was PSD. The only difficult part about Washington, D.C. is meeting traffic, but that's why you have itineraries, you have plans for everything. Every single move, you must have something to look at. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Camacho. One question. Did you guys rent a car on this trip?
Sorry, ma'am. Can you repeat that?
Did you guys rent a vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
How many vehicles?
Um, for I believe we rented one for the first lady.
And were all the security details in one car?
Um, not all the time.
But at some point or at some time, all the security details in one vehicle.
No, ma'am. Usually two follow. Um, either if Gov and First Lady have has to attend an event, it's usually one male and one female.
Okay. So it'd be two inside the car with, let's say, Governor Torres, and then two for Mrs. Torres in another vehicle.
Yes, if not, both principals will be in the same vehicle with one female and one male PSD, and it would be either on standby if anything, just to swap out or
Okay, do you get, if that's the scenario, is it two vehicles or sometimes do you have two different vehicles, one for the governor, one for Mrs. Torres with their respective securities?
so sorry, ma'am, one more time.
When you travel to DC, sometimes you said it's two security details to one principal. Let's say Governor Torres or Mrs. Torres. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And at times during this trip, both Governor and Mrs. Torres were traveling in one vehicle with one male and one female security detail.
If both Gov and First Lady does ride in in one car, then we would have one male and one female be in that same vehicle with them.
So where would the other two security details be?
If I'm not mistaken,
Are
they'll
they
be
on
in the
standby? Are they
either they're in the back or they're on standby either in the hotel or nearby the area.
okay? Thank you. Are there any other members? Recognize Representative Richard Lazama.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, when you have four people in the vehicle, you have the governor and the first lady and the two security detail. Is one of you the driver, or do you have another driver? Do you have another person driving?
One of the PSD will be driving.
One of the.
PSD will be driving.
So did you get a chance to drive too
Me, for the first lady, or
when you were in the same
driving.
vehicle with the governor and the first lady?
I usually don't drive if first lady or governor in the vehicle. I would usually be either within the vehicle.
Okay, that clarifies, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members? Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Officer Galasho, for this trip, how long do you recall was the actual meeting of the Governors Association in Washington?
Will there be different events? So it really depends on um what event they're attending and where I guess it was.
Okay. How many events would you say you attended while escorting or providing personal security for the First Lady?
Um, maybe give and take, maybe in a day or maybe in a day, maybe 3, 4, maybe.
3 or 4 events every day.
Not every day, maybe there's days where it's like short but long period of times. There's times where it's multiple events but in a short period of time.
Or we mean like where there's a few events, but they're
Yes.
long? Okay.
Yes.
And were there events, official activities every day in Washington?
To what I can recall, yes, ma'am.
Yes. And you attended these with the First Lady every day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you recall other meetings outside of the Governors Association happening during this entire itinerary from February 19 to March 2nd?
Sorry, ma'am, one more time.
Do you recall any other meetings outside of the Governors Association meetings occurring during this itinerary between February 19 to March 2nd when you returned?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall the governor giving a speech on Guam?
No, ma'am.
Did you attend any kind of event on Guam with the First Lady or the governor
With this GC trip?
during this during this trip?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And did you or your colleagues escort the governor to official meetings and events every day during this trip?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you recall? Oh, actually, one more clarifying question on this. Do you or your colleagues did you or your colleagues escort the First Lady on any personal activities during this trip?
Could you elaborate more on that, ma'am?
Any activities that were not official government business?
Like shopping and
Sure. Shopping,
um.
movies, any recreational activities?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you elaborate more on that?
Went to like get some groceries or snacks or stuff
Okay.
for a hotel. What I can recall, movies, maybe one movie,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe sightseeing.
So okay. So there were some personal activities, and same goes for the governor. Some
I'm
personal
not so sure.
activities. Okay, but you recalled with the First Lady.
Yes, ma'am.
And who else was on this trip besides the 4 personal security officers, including yourself? Besides the governor, besides the First Lady, who else was on this trip?
Sorry, I don't recall, ma'am.
You don't recall any other government officials?
I believe there's some, but I'm not too sure.
Okay. But the personal security was only for the governor and the First Lady?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall any family members of government officials on this trip?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I yield at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other members? If not, I would like to put up the travel documents of Governor Torres at this time in relation to your travel as well. Short recess. Back online, I want to enter for the record the travel documents of Governor Torres. for the same time period that the witness is traveling. Can we go to the first travel authorization page after that? And this would be exhibit number what, Cam? 6? Exhibit number 6. Oh. it's okay. Exhibit number 7, for the record. On this TA, very top, number 4, it says Governor, the name of the traveler is Ralph De Leon Guerrero Torres +1. And that it will later reflect that Mrs. Diane Torres did travel with the governor from Saipan, number 8, Saipan to Washington, D.C., to Guam and return to attend the 2019 National Governors Association and meeting with the U.S. Navy Seabees as a keynote speaker. To your knowledge, Officer Galasho, did you guys make a stopover in Guam?
Yes, ma'am.
For how many hours?
Um, ma'am, are you asking going to or
Uh,
from here to?
No, on your return, you guys made a stopover in Guam. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How many hours was your layover in Guam?
I don't recall the time, but according to this, it's about 5 hours.
Okay, that's fine. So you arrived in Guam on March 2nd at 1:50 in the morning. Is that correct? According to your travel documents.
According to this, yes.
And you departed Guam on the same date at 7:30 a.m. Is that correct?
According to this document, yes.
Okay, on the governor's, do you recall in the wee hours of the night that you were in Guam, do you recall the governor being a keynote speaker for a U.S. Navy Seabees event?
No knowledge for that, ma'am.
Do you recall him making any remarks being a keynote speaker
No
between 2 in
knowledge.
the morning to 7 in the morning?
No knowledge.
No knowledge or no, he did not make any.
I don't know.
You traveled with him, is that correct?
Yes, but he's not my principal.
Okay, fair enough. Can we go a bit further down on the screen? Stop. Let the record reflect that Governor Ralph Torres requested for this TA and Lieutenant Governor Arnold Palacios approved of this TA. And I'd like to direct your attention to item number 20, transportation costs. During this travel for Governor Torres and Mrs. Torres, they expended over $16,000. To be exact, $16,330 for airfare alone. Further down, number 24, using account number 1021, subaccount 6250, which is the governor's account and travel subaccount. And that D number, it is D8617A, is a federal account. And from that federal account, $5,272.50 was expended for Governor Torres and Mrs. Torres's travel expenses. Can we go to the next page? The next TA. This TA, the original TA was amended on March 11th. Look at the right side, number 2, on March 11th, 2019. And I'd like to direct your attention at this time to number 10, the purpose of and remarks of the amendment is to amend the TA, the original TA, for additional obligation on lodging and excess baggage. Further down, there's 0 transportation costs on this amendment. He included additional lodging in Guam and DC and included excess baggage expenses. It was again requested by Governor Torres and approved by Lieutenant Governor Arnold Palacios using charged to number 24, charged to the governor's account. Further down, the email correspondence. This correspondence is from Mr. Gary Kuwabara from the Office of Economic Adjustment in the United States. And it says there, under travel request authorization, this email is coming from Mr. Peter Paul Camacho to Mr. Gary Kuwabara, to Miss Glenna Regis, with a CC to Mr. Stanley Jacopo and Miss Marie Igato of the Governor's Office. And it notes, greetings, Gary and Glenna. The Office of the Governor is requesting travel authorization for travel from Washington, D.C. to Guam on February 28, 2019. So that's the return trip. And from Guam to Saipan on March 3rd. The Office of the Governor will be using their own local account to travel to Washington, D.C. from Saipan. If approved, the Office of the Governor will use Grant Award, a federal grant, with an account GR 675-18-03, Executive Travel Program of Assistance. Can we move, hold on. Can we move further down to the reservations? Next page, please. The point of contact for Century Travel is Miss Shari Ramos, and this reservation was made on January 31st, 2019, to a Miss Frances de la Cruz of the Governor's Office. Further down, please. Next page. This is a breakdown of the Governor's travel using with this TA. So what was approved by Gary Kuwabara with that federal grant for airfare was $4,082.50. Stipend was given to him from this federal account in the amount of $550. And lodging was approved for $782.42. However, the governor used a local account to further upgrade his travel, costing the CNMI taxpayers for this trip alone for himself and his spouse, costing $16,330 in airfare alone, additional stipend for $1,300, and additional lodging for $1,629. And it is broken down further. further down on that page. So account number 1021, which is the local account, governor's account, airfare, additional airfare cost to the CNMI was actually $12,247 because the federal grant paid for the governor's airfare from Washington, D.C. back to the CNMI. Further down, please. 2 pages down. I would like the record to reflect this is the reservations of booking for Governor Torres departing on February 28th from Washington Reagan National Airport to Houston. Going further down under the class, the booking was confirmed for first class travel for Governor Torres from Washington, D.C. to Houston. Further down, please. From Houston to Honolulu, again, reservations were made for first class travel. Further down. From Honolulu to Guam, business class travel was made. Reservations were made and booked for Governor Torres. And from Guam to Saipan on March 3rd, business class again was made. Reservations were made for Governor Torres. Further down, please. This is a booking from the federal account that was paid, and all, as far as I can tell, reservations were made on economy class because that is the only thing that federal accounts would be approved under. However, the governor expended local funds to upgrade his travel to first class, including his spouse. Further down, please. And it is further reflected in his boarding passes that were submitted as supporting documents to this travel authorization. Short recess for Ms. Galasha. Officer Galasha, you traveled with Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Torres on from February 19, 2019 to March 2nd, 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you personally witness Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Torres travel in first class during this trip?
Sorry, ma'am. I don't know if they did. I didn't see their boarding pass.
Okay, it's not a matter of seeing the boarding pass. It's a matter of, do you recall where you were seated in the aircraft during this travel? Were you in economy class or were you in first class or business class?
I believe I was in the economy area.
Okay, was Governor Torres or Mrs. Torres in the economy area? Were they within your sight?
Um, to what I can recall, I could remember seeing First Lady.
She was in economy class?
I don't recall if she was, but I can eyeball First Lady by where I'm sitting.
You could see her, visually
Yes,
see her.
to where I was sitting at.
Do you recall Governor Torres being in your line of sight in the aircraft?
Um, Not that I can recall. My main priority was First Lady.
Okay, do you recall where Miss Atalik, the other female PSD, was seated in the aircraft?
Within my area, ma'am.
Within your area, 2 rows up or
Um,
across the aisle?
Either maybe the same row or within just maybe arm's reach or
Arm's reach.
possibly yes.
Do you recall where Mr. Joey Cruz was seated in the aircraft?
No.
Were you able to see him?
Yes.
But you don't recall how many rows he was seated.
No, ma'am.
Was he seated in front of you or behind you?
I don't recall that, ma'am.
Do you recall seeing Mr. Jesse Sablon, the other PSD?
Yes.
Would you
Within.
say they were all in economy class?
Yes.
Okay. You said you could see Mrs. Torres within the aircraft in your area. Do you recall approximately how many rows away from you?
Not so sure.
Was she across the aisle?
Uh, no.
Meaning she's on your aisle. Is that correct?
No, she was like either few chairs, maybe in the front at least. But I can recall seeing the First Lady.
Okay, you recall seeing the First Lady in the aircraft during which leg of the flight? You travel from Saipan to Guam, right?
To what I can recall, I usually do my best to have visual
Oh,
for the First Lady, so that's what I try to tend to do.
but you don't recall at which point on your travel were you able to see the First Lady
I
in
don't
the
recall.
aircraft?
I don't recall.
Was it throughout the flight?
Throughout the flight, I usually do my best. Then again, to eyeball the First Lady.
So you could see her throughout the flight,
Yes, I
to
could.
to and from.
Um, yes, at least where I know where she's sitting at and where I have sighting of the First Lady. Yes.
Okay, one moment. Okay. Are there any other questions from? I would like to recognize Representative Richard Lazama and then Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Officer Galicia, can you distinguish between a business class seat and economy seat in the airplane?
Personally, no, sir.
Do you recognize a wider seat and a smaller seat? Can that tell you something that there's a business, a wider seat, and a smaller seat is an economy seat? And I'm pretty sure you were sitting on an economy seat. You can remember that?
To my knowledge, with the documents, it did indicate I was sitting in the economy area, but I don't really recall if I saw them in that area.
When you come in to get, do you come in together with the first lady or even the governor, or they have to go in first because there are what you call first class or business class passengers? Did you separate at that moment, or you come in together to put her in a seat?
I don't recall, sir.
You don't recall. And how did you continue to say that you have your eyeball to the first lady? You can even recall where she
Well,
was sitting at.
well, like I said, sir, I managed to know at least where my principal was sitting at, and that's my main priority. At least, if anything, I know where she's sitting at, and if she needs anything, I will be there to assist. So at least I know where she's at, and I know she's okay.
With two of you on board, two officers, did you ever come to a time where you communicate with your partner that it was time for you to go rest?
Yes,
So not at 20, not at every minute of the hour that you keep your eyeball to your principals, correct?
yes.
I yield back. Thank you, officer.
Thank you, Officer. Representative Lazama. I'd like to recognize Representative Ed Probst at this time.
Thank you, Chairman. I, John, if we could pull back those boarding passes or the report that was on screen earlier with the travel for the First Lady and the Governor, I think identified their seating in first class. Did it? First Lady, do we have that? Uh, for the First Lady. Just any of the, yeah, from Narita to Tokyo or Honolulu, whichever. I just wanted to, that identifies their actual seating. Should be on the boarding passes, right? Keep- There we go. Here we come. Okay, keep going. And we're for the First Lady. Yeah, it's further down. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is type in Guam. Let's go further up. I mean, sorry, further down. Guam, Narita. Okay, and let's go Narita to DC. There we go. Narita, DC. Okay. All right. This. Thank you. So, Officer Galacio, as we can see in this particular boarding pass, and this is Narita to Washington. As in the other trips, we've seen the seating. As you can see, I don't need you to read it, I'll read it for you. It says seat 10J, aisle, United, and it says here business class. That's Narita to DC on a United airplane. Now, based on your experience from flying, uh, you have business first, for example, and then you have your economy. I'm not. I don't. I don't really get to fly in first class because I'm not the governor. But I'm just. If you can correct me on this, isn't that normally a separate part of the airplane? Isn't there a separate? Is there a curtain or something that separates first class passengers from the manatsangs, from us who can't afford it and fly economy? You flew economy, correct? Okay. So you said you had an eyeball. You were eyeballing the first lady, or I'm sorry, or you made sure that you could see her. But how would you be able to see her if she were in a separate part of the aircraft?
Well, I don't recall. Well, when we got in the plane, at least I know where she's sitting at, but I don't know. I can't recall if it was throughout the flight when we're up in the air, you know. But
Okay,
that's
thank you. And that's what I'm trying to state here, because it doesn't make sense that you would be able to see her and be able to see her if she were in a separate part of the aircraft. Again, I worked for Continental Micronesia for 5 years. I used to fly a lot uh, when I was much younger. But the point is, there's a separation in these two. So the fact of the matter is, and this is what I think the chairwoman was trying to allude to, is that she was in fact flying first class with the governor. Is that correct?
sorry, sir, one more time.
Was the first lady and the governor flying in first class, business first, whichever you want to call it, instead of economy? It's a simple question.
Um, that I don't know, but according to this document, sir, it does state there.
And I ask this because um, I have spoken to officers about who have uh, knowledge on providing security detail and other things, and of course it is important for you to ensure that you know where your principal or the person that you are protecting is at all times, especially if something should go wrong, if there was a threat on the aircraft. There can be threats anywhere, right? So you would have to know where she's seated, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So with that knowledge, with your knowledge of that, was she and the governor sitting in first class?
Well, according to this, yes.
Okay. But if they are sitting in first class and you verified that, how would you be able to maintain contact or ensuring that you can see her if it is no longer visible because it is separate?
Well, when we're in the plane, I know I can see the first lady, but I don't recall if it's like while we're flying. But all I can say is that I do recall where she's sitting at, or at least I have sighting of where she's at.
Okay, so you know where she's seated. You know the area that she's in because you want to make sure that you know where she's in case of an emergency or in case of something. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that place was in first class. Is that correct?
According to this, yes.
But also according to your recollection, wouldn't you remember as Representative Richard Lazama mentioned that it's a different part of the craft, or the seats are bigger, or perhaps better service than the regular economy flying passengers?
Well, sorry, sir, but I'm not a frequent flyer, so
Sure, and neither am I. But certainly you can acknowledge that they were in the front of the airplane then.
yes, there. But for me, to my knowledge, I know that first lady was in front of me,
Okay,
not anywhere behind me or.
okay, she was in front, and it was a different part of the aircraft, right? In the first class section, is that correct? Why is this one?
I don't remember, sir.
Okay, so just so we're clear, you acknowledge that those do say first class, but you do not remember where she was seated in the airplane.
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Recognize Representative Richard Lazama.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a continuation with that question. As an officer, Officer Velasco, in order for a person, in order for myself to identify where my principal is sitting at, their numbers of they're not the seats were numbered, and even if you close your eyes and you count from the point that you've met your principal to the point where you're sitting at, to get back, if the plane is dark, you probably say, is this number 10 and you're number 28? And 10 and 28 is 18 seats. You probably go down the line to know where she's at because it's dark and you want to make sure that you protect it. You protect that, First Lady. You can remember that? You can do something like that? I mean, that is totally,
So sorry about next time. I'll keep notes.
you keep notes?
I'll keep notes next time. I'll make sure where I know my principal's exactly sitting.
Okay, that covers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we just keep the screen there? Just a couple more questions. Officer Galasho, can you take a look at your travel documents for the same boarding pass, Narita to Washington? Do you have it? Narita to IAD, which is Washington. I believe that's Dulles or Reagan. I don't know which one. Do you have it in front of you? Can you tell me which seat number you were seated at based on that boarding pass?
35D.
Can you tell me which seat the First Lady was seated at based on that boarding pass?
According to that document, it's 10J.
10J, that is 25 rows in front of you in a separate area of the aircraft. And you were able to see Mrs. Torres in the aircraft during this leg of the flight?
Ma'am, for me, I know where my principal. At least I can visually see my or eyeball at least my principal. So for sure, I at least assure that I know where she's sitting at or around what area she's at.
So you didn't see her?
I eyeballed her.
Eyeballed, what does that mean?
I I made sure where I know where she's at, and I made sure like I can see her.
So
But
you were
I don't
able to
recall.
see 25 rows
Well, I
in
don't.
front of you?
Well, I don't recall if it's up in the air, if whatever. But when we were in the plane, I know where my principal was sitting and what area she's at. Like at least within what area she's at. But
The general area of the aircraft. Is that correct?
I'm not so sure.
No, what I'm asking is, you know the general area of where your principal, in this case, Mrs. Torres, is at in the aircraft, as compared to in relation to your seat. You know the general area of where she is seated. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see her
Yes, I saw her within the plane.
during the flight?
I don't recall.
Okay. Can we move on to the next boarding pass? Just a couple of questions on the next one. So on the next leg, it is from Washington to Tokyo, Narita, to be exact. Can you take a look at your boarding pass, please, Officer Galasho? Do you have it in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what seat you're seated at?
30D.
30D. Based on Mrs. Torres's boarding pass, can you tell me what seat she is in?
1C.
And you're able to see her.
I managed to eyeball her, but with if
What do you mean by eyeball? Do you mean visually seeing her?
I can visually like I saw her, but I don't recall if it's when we're up when we departed that area. Like I don't recall if anything was shot or not.
If Miss Torres stayed in her seat at 1C and you stayed in your seat in 30D, would you be able to see Mrs. Torres in the aircraft? You're testifying under oath.
Well,
Carla.
I know I eyeballed First Lady and where she's sitting at, but I guess when I went to my seat, it's a possibility maybe I can't see from that length, but
Thank
I
you.
remember seeing First Lady.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you. Officer Galasho, you stated earlier that you escorted the First Lady on official meetings and events every day during this trip. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But the Western Governors Association meetings, as far as we can tell, actually occurred from February 22nd to February 25th, 2019. So what official business do you recall happening on February 19, 20, 21, up until the actual conference started on February 22nd?
Sorry, ma'am. One more time.
What official business do you recall happening on that you escorted the First Lady or the Governor to on February 19, 20, 21, up until the 22nd, when the actual Western Governors Association meeting started?
I can recall like a few. I can recall escorting the First Lady to meet the other First Ladies
Mhm.
down there.
Do you know what day
Dinners.
that was?
No,
Okay.
I can't recall. Maybe dinners with the other First Lady and the Governor. Going up to um Kili's office and
Mhm.
so forth.
Okay, but there's no trip report for this itinerary, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, there is a trip report, or
No,
no?
there's no
There
trip
is no trip report. Okay. And then what about from February 26, 27, 28? You departed DC on February 28th. So, but the Western Governors Association meeting ended on or about February 25th. So what happened from February 25th, 26th, 27, 28 when you left DC?
I don't recall, ma'am.
Do you recall any official business happening after
Um,
the Western Governor or the National Governors Association meeting concluded?
no, ma'am.
Okay. And then did you and your PSD colleagues all return to Saipan at the same time,
Yes.
including the PSDs for the governor?
Yes.
Okay. And you came back on March 2nd, 2019, correct?
According to this document, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did the First Lady return on the same flight with you?
To what I can recall, yes.
Okay. And Officer Atalig as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Officer Jesse Sablan?
Yes, ma'am.
And Officer Joey Cruz?
Yes.
Okay. But the governor's itinerary shows that he returned on March 3rd. Do you recall that? Was the governor on the flight with you?
I don't recall, ma'am.
So, 4 security officers, you're saying, were necessary to escort the governor and the first lady to provide security all the way up until the very end when he was left by himself on Guam? Is that what happened?
I'm not so sure.
Okay. What official business do you recall happening on Guam on March 2nd and 3rd, which is when I guess the governor still remained?
I have no knowledge of that.
Okay, because you came back on the 2nd, right? And then could you just explain to us what, in your professional opinion or assessment, are the actual threats that personal security officers are to protect the First Lady and the governor from?
So sorry, one more time.
What are the actual threats that you are protecting the governor and the First Lady from as personal security officers?
Any threats being made? Any
But what specifically? What threats?
uh either personal threats to the first lady or her fam, and if there's any um, fights or whatever within her area, and so forth.
Okay. Did anything like that occur on this trip?
Not that I can recall.
Was there a particularly serious threat or security situation that warranted 4 personal security officers attending this trip?
Not that I can recall, ma'am.
And was there any reason why all 4 personal security officers would come back without the governor? If there was such a serious, or if there was justification to send 4 officers in the first place?
I'm not so sure.
Okay. And ma'am, could you just help us understand how you can't remember where the governor and the first lady sat on the plane? Did they board the plane before you?
I'm not so sure.
Okay. But how can you not remember where they sat on the plane?
Um, I don't exactly know where they exactly sat on the plane, but I know from where I'm sitting, I can see where
Yeah.
my principal was.
Right. I do recall that you said that, but I guess I'm just trying to understand why you wouldn't be able to recall whether they sat in first class if you were way back there in coach.
I'm not so sure.
Okay. And are PSDs allowed to carry their pistols on planes?
No.
No. So if something is threatening, if there is some kind of security threat, how do PSDs respond?
Sorry, ma'am, I don't know.
You don't know?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't know how you would respond if there was a threat to your principal on a plane as a personal security officer?
For me, ma'am, I don't know how, but I would go straight to my immediate supervisor, which was Joey, and make him see what's his plan of action.
I see. Is that part of your training?
Well, he's an immediate supervisor, so I would go to him first. Most of the stuff that's dealing on island, we have certain areas to take care. So with aircraft, I would immediately go to my
I see.
supervisor.
Okay. And you stated earlier that you didn't receive any specialized training, right?
For PSD, no.
Outside of your police academy training, but specifically to be a personal security officer. No training for that assignment.
Yes.
Okay. And then my final question on the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement that has been circulating, and that was one of our exhibits earlier. Could you just explain to the committee a little more how that form came to be in your possession? How did you come to see it?
When I was given that supposed subpoena letter on like last 2 Thursdays ago, I immediately went to my supervisor, which is Chief Manacop, and I seek for guidance.
Okay, and what did he tell you?
He showed me the NDA form. I read the document, and that's that's pretty much it.
He just showed you the form. Did he explain it to you?
He was saying that like as an officer as well, like we would I'm sorry, as officers we're supposed to keep most of our work stuff private, and I guess he was trying to pertain to that NDA form.
Mm-hmm. He told you that your work stuff as a police officer is supposed to be kept private?
Yes, that's actually within our SOP, if I'm not mistaken.
You have SOPs?
For DPS, yes.
Mhm.
Anything for the public would be um anything for the public or whatever, it would go to our PIO or to Dre to
Oh, so this is like in general, your general
Yes,
DPS
any-
SOPs has you going through your public information officer. But earlier, ma'am, you stated that there is no SOP for personal security officers.
to my knowledge, I didn't see any SOP for PSD,
Mm-hmm.
but as a police officer,
Okay. And you stated earlier that you did not sign the PSD, correct? I mean, did not sign the non-disclosure agreement.
yes, I did not sign it
And why did you choose not to sign it?
because I guess it didn't make sense.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, yes, it made sense not saying things out in public, but I don't, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't sign it.
You don't know why you didn't sign it?
Yes, because I don't think it was, I guess, right at that moment to sign it, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think most of us here appreciate that you did not sign it and that you came here and agreed to testify and cooperate with this committee. Um, okay. So did Chief Manicop put any sort of pressure on you to sign it?
No.
Okay. And prior to you becoming a personal security officer, had you been advised in any way that there should be some sort of non-disclosure agreement or some kind of confidentiality or anything pertaining to your responsibilities as a PSD?
I'm sorry. Ma'am. Can you repeat that?
Were you advised in any way by your supervisors or, well, really by your supervisors, that of anything, any obligation on your part to adhere to non-disclosure or confidentiality or anything like that, in at before you assumed your role as a personal security officer?
So, as a police officer, yes, we're supposed to keep most of our work stuff private, but
Mm-hmm.
for PSD, it does state in my my duties and responsibilities that I should be keeping like my principles like private life kind of secretly. So
Okay, so they're private life, sure.
yes.
Okay. Um, and then the first time you ever heard of an NDA was right before this hearing, right? Is that like when you went to Chief Manicop and he just gave you an NDA?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I yield.
I recognize Representative Donald Minglonia.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are just to clarify some of what Rep. Sablan and Rep. Probst brought up earlier. In regards to this trip to DC, when you mentioned that that Mrs. Torres met with other first ladies, what did you do while she was meeting with these first ladies? Did you join the meeting? Did you wait outside? What do you normally do when they go into a meeting?
Well, in some occasions, we'll be waiting outside. Excuse me. If not, we'll be in a different room, but it will be open doors. So if anything does happen, we're right there. So those are the few occasions that I can recall.
How many first ladies would you say they would Mrs. Torres would normally meet with?
A lot.
Do you, I don't know, maybe identify any other PSDs for those first ladies? Have you met with any other PSDs?
Yes, but I don't recall their names.
But they do come with PSDs as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Another clarification question is you mentioned also that you kind of know where the other PSDs on the trip back sat, and you remember who was on that trip. There were four of you guys on that trip, but you can't remember who was with you on the boat trip to Guam?
Well, that was back in 2018, and this one was within a flight. And excuse me, I can only recall the PSDs. because I would be like talking to them and whatnot. But
Right. So you were the only PSD assigned to standby on Guam during this Guam trip?
yes, sir.
No other PSDs.
Yes, sir.
So I know the year may seem off, 2018, 2019, but the months are not far apart, but not one person on the boat ride you remember.
I don't recall because there's multiple trips. We went from, excuse me. There's multiple boat rides that I rode in for the first lady, and I cannot determine if it's that trip or that trip to Tinian. And
All right. How many times have you gone on a boat to Guam?
once,
All right. So within the boat ride from Saipan to Rota, you stop on Rota to Guam. You don't remember anyone who got off with you on Guam.
I don't want to say a name, and it's not right. So, because it's,
How would it be not right?
I mean, there's multiple captains that whatever, but I don't recall who I was sitting next to or
So multiple captains. Can you name some of the captains that have been on any boat ride with you?
I can recall Adrian Mendiola. Um, I believe um, Emery Kaipet. Um, I don't.
All right. So Adrian Mendiola or Emery Kaipet were captains that you've been on the boat with, but you don't know which trip they were with
Yes,
you.
sir.
All right. Thank you, Chair IU.
Thank you. I will take the last one from Representative Ed Probst.
Thank you. This is really not a question, but more of a statement. Officer Galacio, I want to sincerely thank you for coming in here and answering questions to the best of your ability. I I would be remiss, or I think this we would regret it if we did not at least let you know that it takes tremendous courage to do this. Tremendous courage. I I am really impressed with, like, again, you coming here and being as forthright as you could. But with your testimony, with any testimony, sometimes there are repercussions to that. There, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there may be possibilities of retaliation or those who are upset that you were so forthcoming. I feel that it is our obligation um, to ensure that you are well aware that if there is any type of intimidation or threats or any retaliation whatsoever for you coming in today, I sincerely hope that you do know that we will do everything possible to ensure that that doesn't happen. But if it does happen, that we will look out for your best interests. I know that that it like there's a lot of pressure right now, and I want you to know that you are not alone. You are, what you are doing is courageous, and you have done the right thing, and you are to be commended. But at the same time, I believe you should be protected. That if there's any retaliation, anything that goes on, I hope that you at least know that you can reach out to this committee. You can also reach out to the Office of the Public Auditor. You can also reach out to the Attorney General. You are protected. You are an officer of the law, and there should be no politics, no intimidation at that level. Again, Officer Galacio, I want to thank you for coming in today. I appreciate you. This committee appreciates you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. At this time, I would like to inform the witness that you are hereby dismissed But I'd like to remind you that if we need to call you back, um, we have the authority to do so. We appreciate you being here, counsel. Thank you for being here as well. At this time, the witness is dismissed. Short recess. Thank you. We are back in from recess. I'd like to continue with the travel that is entered into evidence, the travel documents of Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Torres. Can we go further down, please, Cam? Okay, go back up one page. I would like to note that in earlier testimony, Officer Galasho said there was no stopovers in Micronesia, in any of the Micronesian islands. The governor amended his TA to include excess baggage of $200. But I would also like to note to draw your attention up to the top portion of that receipt issued by United Airlines. Maybe I want to say an inch down. I can't. I want to note that this receipt for excess baggage was issued in Ponape. Can you please highlight that, Cam? Ponape. And there is no stopover in the Micronesian Islands during this trip for Governor Torres and Mrs. Diane Torres. And the dates are not even in jive with the travel documents of the governor. So why is he submitting a receipt to fraudulently claim $200 worth of excess baggage from Washington, D.C. to Saipan when he didn't even make a stopover in Ponape? I just wanted to enter this for the record and highlight that fact. Also, I want to state for state for the record that all of the boarding passes for Governor Torres and Mrs. Torres have them traveling on first class or premier seats during this travel. One moment. I want to make a calculation because according to the law, there is $1,000 penalty for each leg that you fly on premier class travel. So I'm going to need your help on this, guys. So Governor Torres traveled from Saipan to Guam, seated in 4A, which is a business class seat, according to the boarding pass. So that's $1,000 in penalty. Guam to Narita, he was seated in 4F, which is a business class seat, and that is another $1,000 penalty. From Narita to Washington, he was seated in seat number 10K, which is a business class seat, for another $1,000 penalty. From Washington, D.C. back to Narita, he was seated in 2C, which is a United business class seat. That is another $1,000 penalty. From Narita to Guam, he was seated in seat number 2K, which is a business class seat, for another $1,000 penalty. From Guam to Saipan, he was seated in 1F, which is a business class seat, which is another $1,000 penalty. That is $1, 2, 3, 4, 5, $6,000 in penalty alone for Governor Torres for this trip alone. We will move on to Mrs. Torres's boarding passes. From Saipan to Guam, Mrs. Torres traveled or was seated in seat number 4B, which is a business class seat. From Guam to Narita, she was seated in 4E, which is another business class seat. Narita to DC, She was seated in seat number 10J, which is listed as a business class seat. From DC to Narita, she was seated in seat number 1C, which is a business class seat. And from Narita to Guam, she was seated in 2G, which is a business class seat. And Guam to Saipan, she was seated in seat number 2F, which is a business class seat. 1, 2, 6. For a total of $6,000 penalty for Mrs. Torres's travel to Washington, D.C. Are there any discussions on this? So add to the fact that this trip for Governor Torres and Mrs. Torres amounts to $12,000 of penalty fees. And the fact that the Governor Torres submitted a receipt for excess baggage issued in Ponape um, for this travel. Are there any discussions on these exhibits? I recognize Representative Tina Sablon.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, Chair and colleagues. Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty straightforward. There was first class travel, and first class travel, premium class travel, paid for by the government is prohibited by law, and there are penalties, and the math is pretty simple. And this is just one of many, many trips, such trips. So I would note also that although this boarding or this excess baggage receipt is strange, because it doesn't even appear to be connected to this TA, and yet this TA was amended to include the excess baggage. There was a prior trip that involved a stop in Ponape that the governor took, and that also included first class, premium class travel. But in any event, this is very puzzling and troubling. Thank you.
Short recess, please. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item in the agenda is miscellaneous. We did raise the fact that earlier that Officer Galasho was transitioned from a police officer one to a executive security detail and then back to police officer with salary adjustments. And my concern is, or I'll hand it over to the vice chair. That was his concern, actually.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a concern that I shared with Chair regarding the job description changes and the salary adjustments, because Officer Galatio is a civil service employee, and when they did salary adjustments, she went from 21 to 23,000 up to $30,000, and when she was referred back to a police officer one, they cut her salary back down to that level. So I think that the concern here is she's a civil service employee. Was she changed into a contractual employee when she became a service agent to the first lady, and when she got taken out from that position, was she reverted back to becoming a civil service employee at that pay level. Because if that's not the case and she was not reassigned and under a different contract or different NOPA, no, whether they're exempted service or civil service employees, that might affect her civil service contributions to especially our social security, because they're basing themselves off of that. And then on top of that is her tax returns. She files at 21 to 23,000, and in a subsequent year she's filing at $30,000 plus overtime, and then revert back to $21,000, which she might have incurred actual payment back to the IRS or the central government for taxes. So that's just a concern that I brought up to the chair, just protection to the officer herself, you know. So that's a concern that obviously it's not a part of this investigation that this committee is doing, but we caught onto that, and that's something that we should look into down the road. Maybe the chairman of Ways and Means, if you can see what the status is of her employment under the civil service when she got transferred to from officer one to um, agent to the or sorry, I forget the name, special agent to first lady, and then back to police officer one. Just a concern to her actual basis as an employee of the central government. No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice. In line with that, she was and we don't know if when she was transferred or transitioned to a special agent or security detail, right? Was she on an exempted service contract? And then she was reverted back to DPS as a civil service police officer. Did she have to reapply, recertify? Was it considered a new hire? Because obviously she was, those are the blurry lines that I would like to ask the chairman of the Ways and Means to look into. Um, did it violate any civil service rules and regulations when they did that, when DPS did that?
Well, we will be calling OPM to come in. So this is some things that we can bring up to them next week.
Great. Are there any further discussions? None. If there are none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. I'd like to ask for a recess. I withdraw that question. We will be in recess until tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. If there are no objections.